Alright, um, I don't know how long this is going to last as far as my discussion goes, but lights may flicker off at one point or another because I can't figure out how to change the damn timers, so it is what it is. This is a 2012 Kahonu Tatuaje, by the way, and I'm drinking a bourbon with this Bank Street 100 proof bottled in bond. So that'll be my amenities throughout the video. It's actually a nice combination, by the way, if I'm being completely honest with you. But today I want to talk about the education system and how tragically pathetic it's become. In the 1950s, an algebra exam was basically pre-calculus. In the 1970s, things were less complicated. In the 1990s, things were even less complicated. In the 2010s, things were overly simplified to the point that we were passing people that had no business attempting to understand mathematics. And yet test scores are higher than they've ever been according to the Department of Education. Funny thing that. Not only that, but for the last 2 decades, for the first time in history, we've had consistently declining IQ rates across the board for all races. Consistently for 20 years, but the test scores are higher than they've ever been. How does that work, you might say? Question I asked, certainly. And the answer is, we keep dumbing down the criteria to pass these exams to the lowest common denominator. We're killing meritocracy. A C student used to be average. Used to be the most of the class was a C student because that was an average IQ. That was an average problem solver. That was someone who understood the material at an average level. Now everyone's a B student or an A student with a room temperature IQ. Are you kidding me? I mean, the average American of European ancestry has an IQ of 98. Now let's be honest with ourselves for a moment, because the high end is pulling up harder than the low end is pulling down. So realistically speaking, probably 55 to 60% of the people that you're meeting are below a 98 IQ. That is the median or the mean, not what the average person you encounter is. Okay, most of America is actually significantly dumber than that, if we're being honest. But there are a few intelligent people that pull the average up. 120, 130, 140, 160, 180, whatever. Okay, a 200 is worth like 360s, basically, so keep that in mind. That's why most of the people that you encounter on a daily basis seem incompetent. It's not because they're actually being rude, like Hanlon's razor, which is a tribute I try to live by, would assert is never a tribute to malice that which can be explained by stupidity. Those people are just incapable of being competent because they lack the intelligence to understand what it is that they're supposed to be doing. As sad as that is, it's reality. That's the truth. Now, the average American of African descent is an 87 IQ. Imagine that. 11 points lower. Hispanics are an 88 or an 89, if I recall correctly. And Eastern Asians, particularly Chinese, are around 102 average IQ. And then Indians are somewhere around 100 or 101, if I recall correctly. So essentially, like the Eastern Asians are about on par with those of European ancestry, and then like the Latin American and African groups have substantially less intelligence to be able to process things on average. That doesn't mean that there aren't bright people among those groups. It just means that there's fewer of them. And not only that, too, but like if your average is 87, an order of magnitude higher is going to put you around 100, which isn't the same thing as being around 110 or 15. So it's... And keep in mind, IQ, a lot of people are going to bash, IQ is not a great measure of anything. Well, truthfully, IQ is a measure of problem solving. It's a measure of your ability to logically think through problems and solve them accordingly in a reasonable time frame. That is what IQ is. Is it the ultimate form of intelligence or measure of intelligence? I don't think so. There's other forms of intelligence that we don't measure nearly often as we do IQ. But IQ is a valid, logical, STEM-related measurement that engineers and all kinds of like STEM field scientists, mathematicians, all that kind of stuff, they're going to be excelling at. And those are the problem solvers of the world, truth be told. You can be angry about that if you want. It's really your prerogative as far as all that goes. But the reality is, all of those people that are problem solvers are going to be scientists and mathematicians and all that kind of stuff, because they're the only ones that are actually taught how to solve problems this day and age. And that's an issue that I think is a separate problem that I would like to talk about above and beyond. And that is that ever since John Rockefeller became involved in the education system, John Rockefeller wanted worker bees, not free thinkers. John Rockefeller wanted people that were going to work in the oil field, pump his oil, put it onto a truck, and ship it off to somewhere else. John Rockefeller didn't want people that were going to think about, what if I went into business for myself and started a new oil company? Understandably so. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was the right idea, but he had a truckload of money and paid people to influence them to drive the education system toward a direction of worker bees. And now we fail people upward. We do. People who have no business going into the next grade level used to be held back so that we could be certain that they understood the material that they were supposed to know and be prepared for the world. That's no longer the case. So we fail these people upward, people with room temperature IQs, put them on a path toward college because their skin color is the right color. And that's actually, just so that we are entirely clear, that is not my skin color that is the right color for this particular voyage that we're talking about. And so then they go off to college, and they're educated by other room temperature IQs. And then these people go to law school, and they're educated by lawyers with room temperature IQs. And then they're sent off to be elected to run everything in the government. And instead of the best and brightest and the most capable and competent people running this country, we have a room full of room temperature IQs that are looking to make a buck. Except nobody actually ever makes a buck but the people who are room temperature IQs looking to make a buck, because they write bills to pay themselves. and they funnel money into their own pockets. You have people like AOC who think built-in antenna is actually referring to a place where a TV is actually manufactured and not a feature. Then you have people like Jasmine Crockett who are so ignorant that the world is baffled that she's actually able to spell diphtheria even though she talks about vaccines all the time. Like it's completely comical that these people are in power. Like, under no circumstances whatsoever should they even be remotely close to a book, let alone a law book. And yet here we are. And the only people that win are the ones that keep voting to pay themselves. And I think we need to restore meritocracy. I think we need to stop catering to the lowest common denominator. We need to start sifting out the average students, send them to trade schools. They'll make a decent living. They'll have work guaranteed for a long time. AI is not going to replace that. They're going to have ultimately a better life than they ever would have going to college. And then we need to stop this sham of trying to send people to college that have no business being there. If you have a room temperature IQ, it doesn't matter how badly you want these things. All colleges right now is an indicator of persistence. How long are you willing to put up with BS in order to get what you want? That is what college is. It is not an indicator of requisite skill. It's not. Because we fail people upward. Even in college, we fail people upward. Have you seen some of the white papers that have been written recently in the last few years? Stuff about gender and different things along those lines. Some of that stuff is so absurd that it baffles me that it was even peer reviewed. Like, if I was one of the people and they sent me one of those papers, like probably a good 75-80% of them, if they sent me those first, I'd reject them flat out. Like, there's no scientific basis for any of that stuff, but the party of science wants you to believe there is, and it doesn't exist. It's not. It is Alice down the rabbit hole, and it's the fucking caterpillar with the fucking hookah. That's what it is. It's all a fucking illusion. It's a nightmare. It is terrible. And that is the world that we're stuck in right now. We have troons that are trying to feed pornographic books, adult graphic novels, to children in elementary school because they want to groom them. This is reality. And they get angry if you want to start banning books from these schools because they know that their books will be the first ones selected. Why? Because no self-respecting parent in their right mind is going to sit there and allow their child to read a book that talks about blowjobs when their child is 6 years old. Who's going to allow that? No responsible parent would ever be okay with that in any way, shape, or form. But if they make that hate speech, which is a completely fabricated thing, by the way. Words are not violence. They never have been. They never will be. Words are just people talking. And the only hate speech out there is the speech that people who have blue hair and crazy ideas disagree with. They'll call you a racist and a Nazi and all kinds of other crap, but they won't call you a liar because they know you're not lying. So the reality of all of this is, no matter how much we might like to assert that we have a grasp or control of things, the truth is that the education system is definitely something we need to take back. We need to be more involved in the lives of kids. And little boys wearing dresses using the girls' locker room or dressing room or bathroom or any of those things is unacceptable. Little boys competing in women's sports is unacceptable. It's not. The biological advantage, and I don't care if anybody says, oh, well, you can put puberty blockers, whatever. They had the advantage of 13 or 14 years of testosterone leading up to that point. And testosterone is a performance-enhancing drug in any field, any sport, no matter what. Doesn't matter if you're male, it doesn't matter if you're female. Testosterone is a performance-enhancing drug because it creates denser bone tissue, denser joint tissue, greater muscle mass, higher bone density. Like there's a whole list of biological, scientifically proven effects from having testosterone higher in your system that we have from the last 80 years. And trying to sit there and argue that that's not true is a fool's errand. And by the same token, trying to argue that little boys that have their balls chopped off and wear a dress, those are eunuchs. Those are not females. They're not. Birthing people, or whatever the heck that crap was when that movement came about, let me just tell you, there's no such thing as a birthing person. There's female and there's male. There are only two genders. There's not anything else. Anyone who thinks otherwise is simply confused. Genetically speaking, science has proven there are two genders and a few offshoot cases of trisomy, which are generally fatal before the age of 20. Okay? That's just the reality of it. Either you're a genetic defect which will die young, or you're a natural gender, female or male. There's not more than two ways about this. There's not. So, ultimately what it boils down to is our education system produces idiots that have their own agendas and end up screwing the American populace because, frankly, they are completely content with stuffing their own pockets and have no desire whatsoever to do the job that a politician should actually do, which is to benefit their constituents. Ask Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas as it were, how she started with a net worth of $1 million and within two Senate terms went from $1 million to $40 million as a net worth. That's a very curious question, especially on a $400,000 a year salary, which is what they get paid, by the way. So if you think, oh, these, House reps or whatever, they're not actually just in it for the money. Well, let me tell you something. The House reps make less than senators, but it ain't by a whole lot. They're still making $200,000 a year. And most Americans would be completely fine living on $200,000 a year. If you think not, consider what you make now and then estimate what you would have making $200,000 a year. The vast majority of you will be much better off with that salary. It just is what it is. So how do we fix this? It's a great question. I think it starts with eliminating the Department of Education and kicking it back to the states. The blue states will fall behind instantly. California's already at 23% literacy rate. 1 in 4 people in the state of California can't read the English language, even though it's their native tongue. How retarded is that? So, the other thing I think about here as well is the only incentive to go into politics, truthfully, is money or power. There's no incentive beyond that. The best and the brightest go into business. They are entrepreneurs. They work in finance. They're in venture capital. They're working in AI or tech in some way, shape, or form. They're scientists. They're mathematicians. These are the best and brightest. They have no desire to join politics. People who get a law degree are either looking to make a buck as an ambulance chaser or go into politics, for the most part. There's probably a few that want to be a judge or something like that, and they have noble intentions, but truth be told, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and so I really don't think that anybody that goes through a Juris Doctor program anywhere in this country comes out on the other side of that completely unscathed. And if you know someone that you think you could introduce me to that came out unscathed, I'd be more than happy to talk to them and see for myself. But I know many, many, many attorneys, and not one of them has come out of this system unscathed. So that's just the way it is. Another thing I think that we've gotten away from too is a lot of history books are teaching wrong history. And I dislike that a lot. Lincoln was not who a lot of people think he was. FDR was not who a lot of people think he was. There's a list of other things. Joseph McCarthy, for example, the Red Scare. A lot of people think, oh, this guy was a nut job, blah, 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 blah. You know what? After the wall fell, there were 109 names on his list of communist assets. The KGB confirmed 108 of them once we uncovered their files for their Russian assets. 108 out of 109. I'll be honest with you, I'll take those odds any day of the week. Dude didn't miss. Less than 1% chance of missing? Guy was on point. The Red Scare was actually the truth. It wasn't a narrative. But you know what the funny thing is the Operation Mockingbird was active in the 50s. You know when else it was active? In the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. But the funny thing is it shifted over to USAID at some point. And Operation Mockingbird essentially became a USAID program, so it was no longer under the umbrella of the CIA, or I suppose it potentially was. It just wasn't officially on paper that way. And but they were still buying news media talent. They still are to this day. And if you think that your favorite news anchor is not bought by some entity, I'm afraid to tell you, I hope you're sitting down. But either AEI or some other Jewish-backed organization or the CIA, which ironically is deeply in bed with Jews. We can have a discussion about that another time, but or some other corporate agenda like a Bezos owned or whatever Murdoch owned. There are corporate agendas all over the world for all of this. Nobody is truly independent. The best thing you can hope for is to get news that is less stepped on than it would be somewhere else. And even then, that is a mission. It's a goal. It's an objective. I wish that news stations would just report facts and omit bias. But that doesn't get them ratings. Reading off a teleprompter about the news does not get them ratings. Sensationalizing stuff, clicks, clickbait, that is what drives revenue. And that is why news stations only report bad news. They only put clickbait up, and they don't talk about stuff that the average American should actually know. They talk about stuff that they think they want the average American to know or that they think will draw clicks. That is what they do. And if you want to change that, the only way to do that is to vote with your wallet. And when I say that, I mean stop clicking on the crap. For real. Don't click on it. Avoid it. Stop watching junk. And then eventually what will happen is, over time, the revenue stream will fade, it will die off, and they will adjust course, because that's what capitalism does. Unless you have diehard bean counters in charge, at which point they'll go full communist, and then they'll show their true colors, which most of them have already exposed those if you're paying attention, but I'm not going to dive into that. So we need to start producing people that have an understanding of STEM. Engineers, coders, mathematicians, people who have science degrees like chemistry and physics and those sorts of things. We need people that are capable of innovation. And we don't have a lot of that right now. We're falling behind because we're not producing people who are capable of innovating. And other societies are capable of copying because Western civilization and Western culture has produced basically all of the major advances of the world up to this point. Basically anybody who is any kind of advanced civilization is 90% on Western culture. Sorry, you can be mad about that all you want, but people of European ancestry invented everything, came up with all the great ideas, put it into practice, and actually made it friggin' work. Nobody else invented anything, really. I mean, if you look at history, Western civilization is entirely the effort of men, the patriarchy, if you will, of white men, European ancestry, Vikings and Gauls and Franks and Teutons and everything else. It is all them. And so you could be angry about that, but it doesn't change history. And trying to rewrite it and say that somebody else built everything and somebody else invented everything and all of that other stuff doesn't make it true. It's like trying to assert that John Rockefeller didn't actually create Standard Oil, and yet all of his heirs are living off of the trust fund from that. Quite healthy lifestyles, if I'm being honest with you. But, hey. The Rockefeller family fortune is almost $1 trillion split across all of the heirs. Okay? The reason that there's not anybody in there that is in like the top 100 wealthiest people on the planet, predominantly, is because there are so many heirs that it is split so many ways that each of those individual people might only have $1 or $2 billion. That's all. Out of like 800 and something billion that the family has in assets, the 800 heirs only have, between 1 and 3 billion apiece, depending upon what they've done with their money and all that kind of jazz. So the reality is, you need to understand the weight of what you're up against. Like, the narrative will not win. It's just a matter of creating a current or an undertow that will allow reality to reach normies. And I'm not exactly sure how we do that yet, to be honest with you. I have some ideas, but you have to get buy-in. And there's a lot of people out there that are single issue voters, and they just want to vote to kill babies. In a state that they don't live in, in a body they don't possess. That's the reality of it. Nobody is more oppressed than women of European ancestry who want to kill babies, because they want to kill babies in states that they don't live in, and they want to do it in bodies that they don't inhabit. I mean, I don't even, how do you even logic that, if I'm being honest with you? But communism and equity, we're teaching that in schools. Equity is just communism with a pink bow. It is, let us sell everything to mediocrity, eliminate meritocracy, and try and put everything in the basket of the lowest common denominator and raise them up and let them run everything, so that we can be completely idiocy along the way. Innovation is stifled. Advancement is stifled. Science is stifled. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. Intelligence is the key to 90% of technological and scientific and mathematical advances. I mean, are we really going to sit here and pretend that people like Einstein and Stephen Hawking didn't have these fantastic fucking ideas? Are we really going to do that? I mean, for crying out loud. Some of the most brilliant men that have ever inhabited the planet. And people want to put groups that have 80-something average IQs in charge, because there's not enough of them in charge. Well, you know, the funny thing about meritocracy is people who are capable of leading and worthy of leading will magically rise to the top. It's just the way it goes. Skin color doesn't really make a difference in meritocracy. And that's where we were in the 90s. Now, here we are, and we're having a conversation about promoting people based on skin color that are unworthy, and the results that are and will occur from doing that. And nobody is surprised except the people who seem to think that this is the solution to everything. When it fails, everybody else is laughing while they're holding the bag, and the taxpayer has been screwed the whole way. This is not a winner. This is a loser. But yes, we need to overhaul the curriculum. We need to address a number of things. The Department of Education is not doing the job that it needs to be doing, and frankly, I feel like it's just a waste of dollars. It's a waste of taxpayer time, energy, effort, and money at this point, and I don't see a reason to continue it. There's a number of other things that need to happen, but those need to occur at local levels. But the reality is, as it sits right now, our children are being brainwashed into true communist crap when they really need to be learning how to solve problems, how to think for themselves, and how to evaluate information based entirely upon the merits. But nobody wants to teach them that, because then they'd see through the charade of all the crap that they're being force-fed by blue-haired teachers that are dudes wearing dresses.